it's Ranjini here, and today I am going to take you on a trip to Australia. But first, a quick history lesson. As if regular colonialism wasn't atrocious enough, the British decided,
hey, here's an idea. Instead of exploiting the people who live here and their resources, we shove them out, steal their land, and settle here ourselves, and then never leave.
Sound familiar? Yeah, settler colonialism is exactly what happened in America. The British took what they knew of the happenings in America and took settler colonialism to a whole new level in Australia by declaring it terra nullius. Terra nullius is this imaginary term the British invented to declare that nobody lives in Australia. You see, Britain had a bit of an overcrowding problem. They used to send off their convicts to America as slaves for free labor until America won independence and declared that they will not be accepting any more convicts from the motherland. So in 1788, Britain sent out a ship full of convicts who literally escaped death, pardoned from the death sentence, only to be shipped off to the middle of nowhere, today known as Sydney. These convicts, the lowest class of citizens, would then serve as free labor to create a new British colony in Australia.
By declaring Australia terra nullius, British convicts basically stole land from the Aboriginal people living there. They said that the Aboriginal tribes were nomadic. Spoiler alert, they were not. Before the first fleet arrived in Australia, the entire continent was covered in territory owned by billions of people among a large number of tribes who cumulatively spoke over 500 languages. These Aboriginal people have been living in Australia since at least 50,000 years ago, based on scientific evidence. The tribes moved around within their land, taking care of the areas they lived in before moving to another patch. They weren't technically nomadic because they always came back periodically.
The Australian landscape was unsuitable for cultivation, and the native fauna was undomesticatable. I mean, can you imagine domesticating a kangaroo? Yeah, try doing that, and pretty soon the kangaroo will be the master of you, not the other way around. Due to the nature of their way of living, the Aboriginal people of Australia never even discovered the wheel. They never needed to. They were hunters and gatherers through and through. So now that you have a basic idea of how Australia was founded, I can walk you through all the places I visited. Brisbane, Fraser Island, Port Douglas, Chillagoe, Sheoakridge, and Sydney. My childhood dream of holding a koala came true. I mean, my face says it all. And it loved me back too. Here are some more animals at Lone Pine. Kookaburra, emu, platypus, cassowary. We bought little bags of kangaroo food for $2, and there was a lot of food in those bags. These kangaroos were very gentle and didn't even slobber when they ate the pellets out of your hand. But they will definitely reach into your bag of food and help themselves if you're not paying attention. And we saw a dingo! More on those guys later. We all went to prison one day when we were in Brisbane. This is the HM prison for men. Previously, it used to be for women, and you can see where they were cheap and just covered up the W and O with cement when it changed to a men's prison. The prison used to be an entire complex that covered the hill and surrounding area, and this bell could be heard through the whole complex. Imagine that ringing at full force. Brisbane also had a few scramble crossings, which were apparently a new thing. They were really convenient. I saw a lot of these painted electrical boxes that controlled the stoplights. In true journalist fashion, I conducted a man-on-the-street interview to find out what exactly these were for.
It's a Brisbane City Council signal box for the lights, and there's a program here in Brisbane where you can actually pay a small fee, and either you or the person that you buy it for can actually paint it in any way that they like. So we've got signal boxes all over Brisbane, painted by different artists, and it's really colourful and fun, and it's a really fantastic program.
Experience point, I went surfing for the very first time. We took beginner surfing lessons at Surfer's Paradise on the Gold Coast.
Famous rash guards, which are basically like tight turtlenecks made out of wetsuit material. And these rash guards serve two purposes. One, they keep you warm in the water because we went surfing in winter in Australia because they're in the southern hemisphere. And two, they protect you from cuts and bruises that you will probably get when the water drags you in the sand. Because the water is a bully, okay? So the burning question you probably have now is, did I catch a wave? No, I did not. Listen, after going surfing, I have a whole new respect for surfers, and I kind of understand why surfers have that surfer's body. It's because the water will literally rip you to shreds, okay? The water, you have to be worthy to even get out there to where you can even catch a wave. And I was not worthy at all. So there were a number of people who had bleeding knees. I had bruises at my right thigh for days from being rubbed against the surfboard because the water was pushing me around. I'm telling you, the ocean, the waves, they are bullies. Also, I got caught in a riptide. So I definitely would try surfing again someday, but next time, definitely with a full body rash guard. Because if there's anything I have learned from this experience, don't try surfing without a full body wetsuit. Just don't do it.
This is a bird that will fight you. The white Australian ibis is a sister breed of the African sacred ibis, but the Australian ibis doesn't seem to be a native of Australia. It must have been brought over by the settlers. This bird is pesky and has a very seagull-esque attitude. It does not gel well with the native birds. In fact, it may damage native vegetation and protected wildlife. This is a noisy miner. And this is a coot. Fun fact, Australia has 3 nationally recognized flags. The first is the internationally recognized flag that is a quarter Britain's flag and 3/4 Southern Cross constellation. The second is the Aboriginal flag of Australia, which is black and red with a yellow dot in the middle. The third is the Torres Strait Islanders flag. Other things I noticed in Brisbane were unisex toilets, telephone booths with Wi-Fi, coins that all have the Queen of England on them, flip-flop vending machines, and really cool architecture in the Queen Street Mall area. We got to Fraser Island by a ferry from the mainland. The original native name of Fraser Island is Gari, so that's what I'll be using from here on in the video.
Basically, a couple, James and Eliza Fraser, got shipwrecked on Gari many years ago. The Butchulla people who lived on the island took them in and gave them food and shelter. But one day, James got into an argument and got speared. He died, but Eliza Fraser lived and was eventually rescued. So Eliza Fraser went back to England and traveled around telling stories of her time with the savages. And people started calling the island Fraser's Island, or the island where James Fraser died. Fraser's Island, Fraser Island. And that's how Gari became Fraser Island.
Gari is the world's longest sand island, and the beach is literally alive with creepy crawlies like crabs and worms. The trees growing here get their nutrients from the coffee rock, which, fun fact, also makes an excellent exfoliating face mask. Experience point, I went canoeing for the first time down the sacred Dundonga Creek. There are tons of mangrove trees on the island, as well as giant satinate trees that the British once exploited for their logging industry. Saturnae trees are special because they are resistant to boring by marine animals, so they can last for years in the water. Saturnae trees can take 1,000 years to grow to full height. We also saw plants that predate the dinosaurs, like the king fern. Gari is home to many dingoes, and the Butchulla people had a close relationship with these animals. But dingoes are not native to Australia. They are from Indonesia and were most likely brought over by Asian seafarers. Visitors to Gari were repeatedly told what to do and what not to do in a dingo encounter, because these opportunistic animals can rip you to shreds with their powerful jaws. In Port Douglas, we worked with John Rumney to learn about coral reefs and the threats facing them. Corals can sometimes go through bleaching events. Basically, if the ocean temperature rises even 1 degree more than the coral can handle, it reacts like our bodies do to a fever. It kicks out what it thinks is the cause. But corals think it's the algae living inside them that is causing the high temperatures and kicks them out. The algae is a food source for the coral, so now it's not only hot, but essentially starving itself. The coral turns white, and this is what coral bleaching is. Eventually, the coral can die. If there is one takeaway I have for you from my conversations with John Rumney, it is that there is still hope. Corals can survive bleaching events and recover if they reabsorb the right algae. So we can still save our reefs if we work together to stop climate change.
This is like World War III, but it's caused by ourselves, and we are going to be the ones that suffer. It's not good to just say, well, we've always been using fossil fuels, we should keep doing it. No. If you're thinking of the past and onto your bank account and to how you're going to buy your new car, then we are never going to get there.
Chillagoe is a small village in Australia famous for their caves and rock art sites. The Royal Arch Caves were supposedly discovered by the British, but the local people knew about the caves for hundreds of years. They just never went in there because they didn't have flashlights and it's pitch dark. They sometimes used the caves as burial grounds, but were never really keen on exploring it. Surprisingly, there are trees that grow on top of the caves, and their roots reach all the way down into the water table below the caves. It's called the Royal Arch Cave because if you look closely, this cliff looks like a woman with a crown. Along with the Galaws in Chillagoe, we learned about rock art and songlines in Aboriginal culture.
A songline isn't necessarily the lyrics to a song. A songline is a navigation and storytelling tool used by the Aboriginal people of Australia to navigate their land and pass down stories of their dreaming, which is what they call their origin stories. So a songline isn't just a song. It can be a song, it can be a dance, it can be rock art or some other kind of artwork, or just a good old-fashioned story.
We saw some rock art sites that were typically for men or women only. We don't know what these pictures mean, and I think that's okay. This is the sacred language of the Aboriginal people, and they shouldn't have to explain it to us if they don't want to. Experience point, I went camping for the first time. Sheoakridge is a 165-acre piece of land that was basically considered dingo scrub because nothing could be cultivated there. People were like, nothing grows here, but it's actually a rich piece of land in terms of ecosystems. Sheoakridge is home to 10 different types of ecosystems, including 2 different rainforests. So actually, a lot grows and lives here, including a lot of wallabies and paddymillions that are rehabilitated to be released back into the wild.
Sheoakridge is not for tourists. It is strictly a research and educational facility. Besides, I don't think tourists would want to go use compost toilets in outhouses where giant huntsman spiders the size of your hand will glare you down.
This is a cane toad. Cane toads were brought over to combat the native beetles that were ruining the sugarcane crops. But now these toads are a nuisance and feral species because there's no animal to control the cane toad populations. At last, we arrive in Sydney, the first point of contact with the British invaders and the Aboriginal people, and home to the Sydney Opera House. While we were in Sydney, we saw the Vivid Lights Festival. I think the Vivid Lights was really fun and cool, but I definitely was concerned about the light pollution generated from it. When you're touring the Opera House, Sydney's most iconic tourist attraction, you will get to use special headsets to help you hear the guide without them having to shout to the whole group. There's a special place in the Opera House where you can see 3 different views of the bridge. There's also a lot of Asian influence in Sydney, to the extent that there's a Koreatown, a Chinese friendship garden, and plenty of Asian cuisine restaurants.
There's even an old railway station that was converted into this whole underground marketplace where there are just so many stalls with so many different goods at cheap prices. I'm talking dirt cheap and good quality. It's called Market City and it's in Sydney, and I highly recommend checking that place out because I went there and got all my souvenir shopping done in an hour. Vegemite. If there's one thing that I really wanted to try when I went to Australia, it was Vegemite. I was like, what is this bizarre thing? I looked it up on the internet. And go Google it. Seriously, because it is disgusting. Vegemite, I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemies. So, bottom line, Vegemite is disgusting, but Australians love it, and I'm like, yo, what is up with y'all Australians? Like, I don't understand. I'm telling you, at restaurants and hotels, they have, you know, those little packets of Nutella that you usually find? Nutella or butter or honey sometimes. Yeah, they didn't have Nutella, they had Vegemite. So people actually eat this thing. What's more, I actually went to a sandwich shop and on the menu was Vegemite and Nutella. What is this monstrosity? Oh my god. Vegemite is disgusting, y'all. No, it is literally shit. Just don't try it. I learned the hard way on my first night in Brisbane that in Australia, the concept of lemonade does not exist. If you order lemonade in Australia, you will not get lemonade. You will get Sprite, which is my worst nightmare. So me and a bunch of my friends ordered lemonade at our first group dinner on the study abroad trip in Australia. And when the waiter came to us with Sprite, we were all so confused. And that's when we realized, oh, lemonade equals Sprite in Australia. The other thing that I tried in Australia that is a very popular food item in both Australia and New Zealand is a meat pie. Now, I'm vegetarian, so obviously my pie did not have meat in it. They had a tandoori veg one, so that was great. But pie face was actually a really cool, cheap way to get good food that actually tasted really good. Like, I loved it. I loved that tandoori veg pie. Like, it was good. It was really good. And that's it for my travels in Australia. I hope you guys learned something from this video and I hope you enjoyed watching this. Australia was a really fun experience and there were a lot of things that I tried for the very first time, like surfing and canoeing and snorkeling, things I never would have been able to do without this opportunity. So It was amazing. I hope it was educational and at least entertaining. Bye.